Hello, and welcome to the Psychology of Us with Professor Starr. This is a space where we explore the fascinating ways our minds work, how psychology shapes our everyday lives, and how understanding it can help us live with more purpose, compassion, and clarity. Today's episode is about something we all deal with, yet rarely stop to think about it. Waiting. Whether it's standing in line at the grocery store, waiting for an important email, or even counting down the days to a long-anticipated event, waiting can be frustrating, sometimes even excruciating. So why is that? Why do we hate to wait? What's happening in our minds and bodies when patience runs thin? And more importantly, can we learn to reframe those moments of waiting to become opportunities for growth and calm, rather than sources of stress? As we dive into the psychology of patience and impatience, I'll be sharing insights from psychological theories, fascinating research, and a few personal stories that I think you'll find relatable. My goal is to help you walk away with a deeper understanding of why waiting feels the way it does, and maybe, just maybe, a little less dread the next time you're stuck in traffic or waiting on hold. So, grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and let's explore the psychology of why we hate to wait. You ready? Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to the Psychology of Us with Professor Starr, where we explore the mind's influence on life, relationships, and society. Starr is an existential psychologist, professor, and author dedicated to exploring the core challenges of human existence, how we find meaning, embrace responsibility, and navigate life's challenges. Known for a thought-provoking yet accessible approach, RJ inspires listeners to cultivate self-awareness, emotional intelligence, authenticity, and purpose. This podcast is designed for all psychology enthusiasts, practitioners, students, and anyone curious about why we think, feel, and behave the way we do. Each episode unpacks theories, explores complex questions, and offers insights that deepen understanding of the human experience. So settle in, stay curious, and discover the psychology of us.
Let's start by unpacking what happens in our minds and bodies when we're forced to wait. On the surface, waiting might seem like a trivial inconvenience, but it's actually a complex psychological experience. It taps into deep-seated cognitive and emotional processes, ones that have evolved over thousands of years. Think about this. Our brains are wired to seek rewards. When we anticipate something, whether it's a delicious meal, an exciting event, or even just an answer to a question, the neurotransmitter dopamine kicks in. Dopamine is often called the feel-good chemical, but it's actually more about motivation. It creates that feeling of anticipation that keeps us moving toward a goal. When waiting drags on, the dopamine system can falter, leaving us feeling frustrated, even agitated. Here's a fascinating study to consider. You've probably heard of Walter Mischel's favorite marshmallow test. In the late 1960s, he and his colleagues studied children's ability to delay gratification. You know the setup. Kids were left in a room with a marshmallow and told they could eat it right away or wait 15 minutes and get 2 marshmallows. What's often overlooked in this experiment is just how difficult that waiting was for the kids. Some sang songs to distract themselves. Others avoided looking at the marshmallow altogether. Those little strategies tell us a lot about how the human brain copes with delayed rewards. But waiting isn't just about internal processes. It's also shaped by how we perceive time. Daniel Kahneman, a Nobel Prize-winning psychologist, studied how people experience time subjectively. He found that when we're engaged and focused, time tends to fly by. But when we're bored, anxious, or stressed, time feels like it drags. Waiting, particularly in situations where we feel powerless, like standing in line or waiting for test results, can amplify that sensation of stretched time. Culture also plays a huge role in how we approach waiting. In some societies, patience is seen as a virtue, a sign of wisdom and maturity. Think about traditions like Japanese tea ceremonies, where every movement is deliberate and waiting becomes an art form. Contrast that with many Western cultures where speed and efficiency are often prized above all else. I remember visiting Italy years ago and being surprised by how relaxed people were about time. Trains weren't always on schedule and no one seemed to care. It was a stark contrast to the hurried impatience we see so often in the United States. Let me share a personal anecdote that might resonate. Years ago, I was traveling through Southeast Asia and I found myself at a small cafe in Vietnam. I ordered a coffee and it took what felt like forever to arrive. At first, I felt that familiar sense of irritation bubbling up. Why was it taking so long? Wasn't my order simple? But then I noticed something. The cafe owner was meticulously preparing each cup of coffee with incredible care, using a traditional drip method. Suddenly, the wait felt less like an inconvenience and more like part of the experience. I wasn't just waiting for a coffee, I was participating in a ritual. Moments like that remind me that our perception of waiting isn't fixed. It's deeply influenced by context, culture, and even our mindset. Waiting, it turns out, is as much a psychological construct as it is a physical one. So why does any of this matter? Because understanding the psychology of waiting helps us see that impatience isn't just an inevitable reaction. It's something we can examine, understand, and even reshape. Now let's look at how impatience can hurt us emotionally, physically, and socially, and what we can do about it. Let's start by talking about why impatience can feel so overwhelming and why it's not just an emotional nuisance, but something that can genuinely hurt us if left unchecked. At its core, impatience is a stress response. When you feel that rush of frustration while waiting, it's your brain signaling that something isn't going according to plan. That signal triggers your body's fight or flight system, releasing stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones are great if you're running from a predator, which evolutionarily speaking is why we have them in the first place. But they're not so helpful when you're stuck in traffic or waiting for your food to arrive. Over time, chronic impatience can lead to physical consequences. Studies have shown that people who are constantly impatient are at a higher risk for hypertension and cardiovascular disease. Think about that. The simple act of getting worked up over delays can damage your heart. It's a stark reminder that our emotions aren't just fleeting, they have real, tangible effects on our health. But impatience doesn't just take a toll on your body, it affects your relationships too. Imagine this scenario. You're waiting for a partner or a friend who's running late. Each minute feels like an hour, and by the time they arrive, you're not just irritated, you're primed for an argument. Impatience in these moments often stems from unmet expectations or a lack of control. It's not about the waiting itself, but what the waiting represents, feeling overlooked or undervalued. This ties into a concept from attachment theory. People with anxious attachment styles often struggle more with waiting because it triggers a fear of abandonment or rejection. For them, waiting isn't just about the passage of time, it's laden with emotional weight. It's fascinating how something as seemingly as simple as waiting can tap into deeper psychological problems, isn't it? Let's also consider how impatience plays out in broader societal terms. We live in what I like to call the Amazon Prime era, where instant gratification is the norm. Need something? It's at your doorstep tomorrow, maybe even in a matter of hours. Are you hungry? Food's on its way. Bored? Endless entertainment is just a swipe away. This convenience has undoubtedly made life easier, but it's also rewired our brains to expect immediate results. When things don't happen as quickly as we'd like, we feel disproportionately annoyed. I saw this firsthand while teaching a class on behavioral psychology. I assigned a project where students had to track their daily habits over 2 weeks. Many struggled with the exercise because they weren't seeing immediate results. One student even said, "If I'm putting in the effort, I should see a change now." It's a telling example of how our patience muscles are weakening in a world that promises instant rewards. Another layer to this is the role of technology. Social media, for instance, thrives on immediacy. Notifications, likes, and comments give us an almost constant stream of feedback. When that feedback is delayed, when a post doesn't get as many likes as quickly as we hoped, it can make us feel restless or even inadequate. It's a modern twist on impatience, one that's deeply tied to our sense of identity and self-worth. So what's the takeaway here? Impatience isn't just an inconvenience, it's a stressor, that can affect your body, your emotions, and your relationships. It's fueled by a combination of biology, psychological patterns, and societal expectations, and it's something we're all vulnerable to. But here's the good news. Impatience is not a fixed trait. It's a reaction, a habit even, that we can work on. In this next section, we'll dive into the strategies and mindsets that can help us cultivate patience, turning waiting from a source of stress into an opportunity for growth. We've explored why waiting feels so uncomfortable and the toll impatience can take on us, but here's where it gets interesting. Patience isn't something you're born with or without. It's a skill, and like any skill, it can be developed. Let's talk about how we can begin to cultivate patience and, in so doing, transform the way we experience waiting. One of the most powerful ways to approach waiting is by reframing it. When we're stuck in a long line or waiting for news, our default mindset often centers on what we're losing: our time, our control, or our plans. But what if we could see waiting as an opportunity instead of a loss? It might sound a bit idealistic, but it's a shift that's deeply rooted in mindfulness. Mindfulness, a concept popularized in the West by Jon Kabat-Zinn, is the practice of being present in the moment without judgment. When applied to waiting, mindfulness teaches us to focus on what is, rather than what isn't. Instead of stewing in frustration over the time passing, we can use that moment to observe our surroundings, tune into our breathing, or simply allow ourselves to pause. I remember standing in line at the post office one afternoon, a particularly slow-moving line. My initial instinct was to pull out my phone and distract myself, but instead I tried something different. I closed my eyes for a moment, tuned into the sounds around me, the hum of conversation, the faint squeak of shoes on the tile floor. What struck me was how quickly my impatience dissipated. By shifting my focus, I turned an annoying situation into a small moment of stillness. But reframing isn't just about mindfulness, it's also about understanding the value of delayed gratification. Remember the marshmallow test we talked about earlier? The kids who managed to wait for the second marshmallow weren't just exercising willpower, they were employing strategies to make the waiting bearable. Similarly, when we focus on the larger reward, whether it's a better outcome, a deeper connection, or simply a calmer state of mind, we're more likely to stay patient. Another strategy for cultivating patience is to intentionally expose ourselves to situations that require it. Think of it like exercising a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Start small. For instance, next time you're at a red light, resist the urge to check your phone. Or when you're waiting for your coffee to brew, allow yourself to simply stand and wait without distraction. These small moments add up and build your tolerance for larger challenges. Here's another way to think about patience. Gratitude, right? When we focus on what we have rather than what we lack, the urgency of waiting often fades. For example, instead of fixating on how long it's taking to get a response to an email, we can appreciate the fact that technology allows us to communicate so easily in the first place. Gratitude shifts our perspective from scarcity to abundance, making it easier to endure those moments of delay. Patience also offers profound psychological rewards. Studies have shown that people who practice patience tend to have better emotional resilience. They're less likely to act impulsively, more likely to persevere through challenges, and often report higher levels of life satisfaction. In relationships, patience can be transformative. It allows us to listen more deeply, respond more thoughtfully, and ultimately connect more meaningfully with others. I once read a case study about a surgeon who described his approach to a particularly long and complex procedure. He said, "Patience isn't about waiting, it's about staying focused on what matters, even when it takes time." That idea stuck with me because it reframes patience as an active process, not a passive one. It's about choosing to remain engaged with the present moment, no matter how slowly it seems to move. So where does this leave us? Waiting will always be a part of life, but how we experience it is up to us. By reframing waiting, practicing mindfulness, and building the habit of gratitude, we can turn patience into a strength rather than a struggle. It's not about becoming perfectly calm in every moment. That's impossible. But about learning to navigate those moments with intention and resilience. In our final segment, I'll leave you with a few closing reflections on how patience connects to our larger psychological growth and what you can take from this conversation into your daily life. So as we wrap up today's episode, let's take a moment to do that. Let's reflect on what we've uncovered about patience and why it matters. Waiting, in its simplest form, is a universal experience. It's something we all share, no matter who we are or where we come from. But how we respond to waiting, that's where our individuality and our capacity for growth really comes into play. We've explored the brain's natural aversion to delays, the cultural and societal factors that shape our impatience, and the ways in which our fast-paced world has rewired us to expect instant results. We've also seen how impatience can harm our bodies, our relationships, and even our sense of self. But more importantly, we've talked about how waiting doesn't have to be a source of stress. It can be an opportunity. Patience isn't passive. It's an active choice, a deliberate shift in perspective. It's about taking a moment that feels frustrating and turning it into something meaningful, whether through mindfulness, gratitude, or simply embracing the process. It's about catching yourself in that moment that your all caught upness is starting to rile you up. It's a skill that grows over time, and like any skill, it requires practice. I'll leave you with this thought. Waiting can teach us about who we are and what we value. When we learn to sit with the discomfort of not having what we want immediately, we often find clarity about why it matters to us in the first place. That clarity can deepen our relationships, strengthen our resilience, and help us live more fully in the present moment. So the next time you find yourself stuck in line, caught in traffic, or waiting for news, try to see it not as wasted time, but as a chance to pause, reflect, and grow. You might be surprised at what you discover.
That wraps up this episode of The Psychology of Us with Professor R.J. Starr. Each conversation is a step toward greater understanding of ourselves, each other, and the forces that shape human behavior. Listeners are invited to continue the conversation by sharing their thoughts, questions, and topic suggestions at profrjstarr@outlook.com. Every message helps shape future episodes, ensuring the discussions remain relevant, thought-provoking, and meaningful. For those who find value in these explorations, subscribing and leaving a review is a great way to support the podcast and bring these insights to a wider audience. Until next time, stay curious, stay thoughtful, and keep exploring the psychology of us.